what it does with, and we'll first look and see if it's possible to do a tuck or slip before, because if you try to do a tuck, especially on something that won't do a tuck stitch, then it's just gonna like really jam up your carriage. So first check and make sure your card number can do those things. Everything will be able to be done on the fair aisle. That's your MC here in the middle. So when we're doing the punch card, we're using this knob, and then these things right here, and also your little tabs. So these little tabs, sometimes they break apart, which is fine. You have to do them individually anyway. You should have 4, or 2 sets of 2. And don't, like these things, they really should be stored better. You don't want them to get crunched, and you want to make sure you're putting them in the right way. So this is super basic, like it just goes in like this, and then, I can't do this backwards. It goes in like this, and then you want to make sure it's kind of lined up properly, and then if I push this in and turn it, it will grab it. I can also hold that down and turn it so that I don't have to keep pushing and turning. And what I want to do is put these together. So the first thing to see is there are numbers here. And then there are these two, see these 2 little holes on either side? Those 2 little holes need to be lined up. That's what these go into. But this is incorrect. If I see a big space in between my numbers, that's not right. You want your numbers to continue like that. So I want the holes to line up on the side, and I want numbers to continue, right? 35, 36. So if you see the numbers continue, you did it right. And you can go ahead and put these guys in, so it's just like a snap. So put the long part in back here, and then I can just fold it over, put it through, make sure it's all the way through, and then I just snap on the front of it, right? Same with this side. I'm just gonna stick this through. If you put it the opposite way, where the numbers don't connect, it will jam up in here, and you will basically ruin the punch card. So make sure you put it on the right way. And then you'll see it's numbered. Some patterns are repeated, and you'll be able to start understanding what's happening here when you start doing it. Some patterns are repeated, and it, sometimes it doesn't matter where you start for these, for instance. But if I were to start at the beginning, I'm going to start at this line. This line says 1, but the machine isn't reading that line because it's right here, and I can see it. The machine is reading underneath there, and I think, I have to look it up, I think it's 7 rows underneath it where it's reading. So if you ever screw up and you know what row you're on, it's not, you don't reset it to that row, you reset it to row, I think it's 7 rows below that, or if you know what the pattern is, where the next line is in the pattern. So that's where I would start if I wanted to start from the beginning. For playing around, it doesn't really matter where you start, but that's the correct way to put the punch card on. And then you've got 3 different levers here. The first one is for the machine to understand what the pattern is. You'll only use that for 1 pass. The second one moves, so if I wanted to just do 1 row and like make it a stripe, I would put it on that one. It's gonna read it, and it's not gonna change the punch card at all. If I want the punch card to move forward every normal amount of pattern, I put it in the middle one. If I want to elongate the pattern, I put it on the last one. So the first one, I'm always going to start it here on number 1. And I'm going to do a quick bind on. And I'm going to show you 3, these are fun to play with, but especially the tuck stitch can be finicky. So make sure your card works with a tuck, because tucks keep a bunch of stitches on the needle and then pull them up. So if it's not one that's supposed to work with a tuck, you'll have way too many stitches on the needle, and it'll jam up the carriage.
How do we know if it works with this one?
You'll look at the manual.
Okay.
The manual lists all the ones that do slip, or these cards, tuck, or these cards, and it shows you examples, but they're like black and white copies. It's really hard to understand it from the example. You can kind of see a little bit, but well, that didn't work, because I did not push my thing wrong. So that loop, sometimes you guys will get that loop. Just if you are getting those loops when you go to go past, just kind of gently pull up like this, and it should solve that problem. It's not a big deal in the beginning, but what happens is it's just loose and it gets caught under the carriage somewhere. So I'm actually gonna maybe add a little bit more. And give myself a little bit more of a space. Simple increase. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is that this card actually works with all of them. So I'm going to do a tuck pattern, slip pattern, and then farewell, and show you what's happening with these. So in order to start, I need the machine to read a pass of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is put it on KC. That's my card, and it's going to engage this strip right here. You see how that's moving now? Under there, it should be, yeah. So now it's like engaged. That's how you know like it's working. So I should have it on 1 in KC. What I'm gonna do, this is a normal knitting row. So even though it's engaged in here, I haven't told it to start doing the punch card yet. So what it'll do is just set up the pattern. So it knitted a normal row, but it also now it's working in upper working and regular working position. So now what I need it to do is advance the pattern, and I also have to tell it what I want it to do. So you can do tuck one direction, not the other. For regular, just do it both directions. So I'm going to push both of those in. So I'm telling it to do tuck, I'm telling it to advance the pattern, and now I can just knit on here. So this is really nice too if you want to just do one long swatch and keep changing things. If you have your safety pin and a little tag, you can label things as you're going along, and then you can see, oh, I had it on stitch size 8, I did a tuck with punch card 2. And then you'll have all these little samples for yourself that you can go back and look at of what did those punch cards look like if you want to use them. So I'm just going to knit a little bit. So now you can see there's a pattern happening. So what it's doing is, this is a texture only kind of a thing. It's keeping stitches and then pulling them together, so you can see there's one long one and then a bunch of squished ones, and so it's making a textured kind of pattern. I can actually do this, you know, if I change my stitch size, it'll matter. I can do this elongated. It's a little risky with the tuck. I think it does work with this one, but because when you elongate it, it's doing it instead of every row, it's like doing it every 2 rows, so it's like doubling what you're doing. And if there are too many stitches, yeah, so you see it's the same thing, but now there's way more stitches scrunched together. So be careful with that elongated one with the tuck, because sometimes, depending on how thick your yarn is, it could be way too many stitches for it to handle. But it's working with this one. See, now this would be great to label. This is a regular tuck. This is the elongated tuck with punch card number 2. So now if I ever, you know, if I want to use a pattern or something like that, I know what it looks like. I'm a very visual person, you guys probably are too, so it's nice to have like samples of things, and feel free to use the walls, pin them up, things like that. So now I'm going to switch to I'm going to do some plain stitches. So I'm just going to take that off of there, put that back on there so I don't forget that's where it's going to be when I start the new one. Now I'm going to do some plain stitches, and then I'm going to go slip stitch, and then I'm going to show you the multicolor. So, oh, I still have it engaged. So I'm going to do plain stitches, back to NL. Now it's nice to kind of do borders too, you know, in between, so that you can see the differences of things. I'm going to go back to KC. I'm going to go once across so it sets up the pattern. Now I'm going to tell it to do a slip stitch, part or skip. That's all the same thing. It's like partial. It's partially stitching. So now I'm going to tell it also to advance the pattern. So I have this. That's on KC, advancing the pattern. So what's happening is, you see this little this little thing right here, that's a slip or a skip. It's not knitting on that needle. So you see there, this is the pattern. It's like 2 and then 2. It's kind of hard to tell, but like I have 2 skips right here, and then I have 2 skips right here. It's like a barred pattern. That's my 2, that's my 2, that's my 2, that's my 2. So I'll show it to you with elongated 2. It's gonna make this, instead of 2 rows, it's gonna be 4 rows. So it's gonna double everything. So see, first I had 2, now I have 4 right there. So this one is easy to do with elongated, because this one, see how it's scrunching it all? This one's just skipping needles, literally. So you'll have this kind of a float pattern, which, you know, it just makes a texture basically when you're working on single color. And now I'm going to do some plain stitch, and then I'm going to do multicolor, and then I'm going to let you guys play with it. It's really fairly simple, and you get a lot of neat kinds of things that happen. Sometimes the machines hate the punch cards and they don't work properly, so we'll just have to see what happens, but they can be a pain on some of the machines. Alright, so now I'm going to do multicolor, so I'm going to start exactly the same way. I'm going to engage my KC, be on my number 1 here, go across once, just to set the pattern up. I haven't told her what I want it to do yet. I'm going to engage it so it goes forward, and now I'm going to put my other color in here. So leave that in there, and then put your second color in this. So I kind of wiggle it until it kind of pops and it's free but secure back there. There's 2 places it gets past, so you might hear it go like click click, and it goes past the top one and the bottom one. You want to make sure you can't pull that out of there. You see there's this top and this bottom. You want it back behind both of those. So now all I have to do is put my multicolor in, and if you have a bulky, I think your multicolor is just the pink one. The other one's lace. I'll have to look at it. It's just one of the buttons. I don't think it's both of the buttons. I'll have to look at it. And it's on KC. It's on multicolor. I'm telling it to advance the pattern. So now it's going to do a... Oh man. Something happened. No. It got caught on a needle. Come on. So what happens, pull your sinker plate off first. It hit this needle, and darn it, I'm probably gonna have to take that needle out. And then I'm gonna take this one off.